A glass case, fluorescent museum lights, a single rifle lies on green felt, quiet and anonymous. Most visitors walk past without even slowing down. To them it's just an old hunting gun, wood stock, blued steel, a relic from somebody's grandfather's attic. What they don't know is that this hunting rifle once silenced 11 Japanese snipers in 4 days. It turned a ridiculed lieutenant into the deadliest man in a jungle full of ghosts, and it helped change how the United States Army thought about snipers forever. This is the story of that rifle, and of the man who refused to leave it in his tent. January 22, 1943, 9:17 in the morning, Guadalcanal. Second Lieutenant John George crouches in the ruins of a shattered Japanese bunker west of Point Cruz. Sweat sticks his shirt to his back. The air is thick with humidity and the smell of rotting vegetation, cordite and fear. In his hands rests the thing everyone has mocked for 6 weeks, a Winchester Model 70 sporting rifle, topped with a Lyman Alaskan scope, bolt action, 5 rounds, not government issue, not standard, not serious, according to every officer who laughed when they first saw it. His commanding officer had called it a toy. The other platoon leaders called it his mail-order sweetheart. The battalion armorer wanted to know if he planned to shoot deer or Germans. Now those jokes are very quiet, because in the past 72 hours, Japanese snipers hidden in the trees around Point Cruz have killed 14 men from the 132nd Infantry Regiment. 14, and if George fails today, there will be more. He lies prone in the cool dirt of the captured bunker, his eye pressed to the scope. He watches a banyan tree about 240 yards away. No movement, no obvious enemy, just leaves, branches, and shadows. The jungle hums around him. Insects buzz, parrots screech. Somewhere in the distance, artillery thumps like an angry heartbeat. George tunes it out. He has spent most of his adult life learning how to ignore everything except the tiny circle of glass in front of his eye. He is 27 years old, former Illinois state rifle champion, youngest winner in state history, 6-inch groups at 600 yards with iron sights. On paper, he is exactly the man you want when someone needs to die at long range. In reality, up to this moment, he has exactly 0 confirmed kills. Rewind a few months, before the jungle, before the snipers, before the bodies, Camp Forest, Tennessee. George opens a wooden crate marked fragile. Inside is the rifle he has waited 2 years to afford. 2 entire years of National Guard pay saved for one purpose, a precision rifle he trusts. Winchester Model 70. Smooth bolt, good barrel, solid bedded stock, topped with that Lyman Alaskan scope and a Griffin and Howe mount. Civilian gear, expensive gear. When he shows it off, the reaction is not what he'd hoped. The armorer squints at the gun. "Deer rifle?" he asks. George answers, "Japanese rifle." The men laugh. The standard rifle, the one every other man in George's battalion carries, is the M1 Garand. It weighs about 9.5 pounds, semi-automatic, 8 rounds, no magnified optics, but fast, tough, and deadly in the hands of trained infantry. George's rifle weighs about 9 pounds. The scope adds a bit more. Bolt action. 5 rounds, slow to fire in theory. Exposed. Odd. Captain Morris looks at it and shakes his head. "Leave the sporting rifle in your tent," he orders. "Carry a real weapon." George nods, then quietly decides he's going to carry it anyway. Fate, of course, refuses to cooperate. The unit ships out before the rifle can catch up. While other men clean their Gorans on the transport across the Pacific, George's beloved Winchester sits in a warehouse in Illinois. He spends the voyage watching other men lovingly oil their standard-issue rifles while he fills out paperwork, again and again, begging the system to forward his toy through military mail. 6 weeks later, in late December 1942, on Guadalcanal, a supply sergeant finally drops a crate at his feet. Another fragile, stenciled box, another crowbar, another pounding heart. Inside, the Winchester, packed in cosmoline, the scope, the mounts, and the last piece of his plan. By then, the 132nd Infantry has taken over from the battered Marines. The Marines have been fighting here since August. They have captured and held the vital Henderson Field airstrip, but they have not yet cleared all Japanese forces from the western part of the island. The enemy still clings to the ridges, jungles, and coastal groves. The Marines have given a name to one of those ridges, Mount Austin. To the Japanese, it is another stronghold. Roughly 500 men, 47 bunkers, dense jungle. George's battalion attacks on December 17th. 16 days of brutal fighting follow. Mud, rain, short-range firefights, bayonet charges, mortar bursts that shred trees into splinters. They lose 34 men killed and 279 wounded before finally taking the western slope on January 2nd. In all that time, in all that chaos, John George fires his fancy Winchester rifle exactly 0 times in combat. The jungle around Mount Austin is bunkers and fixed positions. The jungle around Point Cruz is something far worse. West of the Matanikau River, the terrain changes. Gone are the concrete bunkers and trenches. Instead, coconut groves and huge banyan trees. Massive trunks 8 feet thick, branches stretching 90 feet into the sky. And in those trees, the Japanese have left a special kind of nightmare: snipers. They climb before dawn, settle into natural hides among the branches, and do not move all day. They wait for the slightest carelessness: a helmet too exposed, a man filling canteens, a patrol crossing a clearing. Their rifles are Arisaka Type 99s with scopes. Their doctrine is simple: shoot once, then move to a new perch when possible. They know the jungle, they know patience, they know how to make an American soldier afraid to stand up straight. On January 19th, a sniper kills Corporal Davis while he fills canteens at a creek. On January 20th, another sniper kills 2 men from L Company during a routine patrol. On January 21st, 3 more men die. One of them is shot clean through the neck from a tree that patrol had walked past twice without ever seeing the shooter. The battalion commander has had enough. That night he sends for George. They meet under dim lamplight, maps spread out. A cigarette burns down in an ashtray. Outside, the jungle hums like a living thing. The commander looks at the oddbolt lieutenant with the toy rifle and asks the only question that matters: can that mail-order rifle actually hit anything? George explains. No bravado, just facts. Illinois State Championship at 1,000 yards in 1939. 6-inch groups at 600 yards with iron sights. With the Lyman Alaskan scope, 5 rounds inside 4 inches at 300 yards. The commander listens, then sets the terms. You have until morning to prove it. If he fails, the Winchester goes back into the tent, permanently. Through the night, George checks his rifle like a surgeon preparing his instruments. He scrapes away every trace of cosmoline, cleans the bore, checks the scope mounts, runs patches through the barrel until they come out clean. He loads .3206 ammunition, the same cartridge used in the Garand. The bullets gleam dull copper in the light. He lays them out like little promises. At dawn, he moves to the ruined Japanese bunker overlooking the coconut groves west of Point Cruz. The bunker is a good position, solid cover, decent elevation, clear sightlines into the big banyan trees where intelligence says the snipers hide. He brings no spotter, no radio man, no extra eyes, just his rifle, a canteen, and 60 rounds of ammunition on stripper clips. He lies down, breathes, watches. The Lyman Alaskan scope is only 2.5 bix magnification. By modern standards, it is almost nothing, but in this jungle, even that slight magnification makes the difference between solid shadow and the shape of a man. He works methodically, left to right, top to bottom, tree by tree. At 9:17 a.m., everything changes. One branch moves, just a small shift, no wind, no bird. 87 feet up in a banyan tree, 240 yards away. Something is wrong. George watches. The branch moves again. Then the shape resolves. A man in dark clothing, nestled into the fork where 3 branches meet. A rifle. The Japanese sniper faces east, watching the trail where American supply parties move. George adjusts his scope. 2 clicks right for wind. His breathing slows. The Winchester's trigger breaks at about 3 pounds, smooth as glass. At Camp Perry years earlier, he had spent hours stoning and adjusting that trigger until it broke exactly the same way every time. Now the question is simple: can a civilian target rifle kill a man who has spent his life training to kill him first? He exhales, squeezes, the rifle kicks into his shoulder. The report cracks across the grove like a whip. 240 yards away, the Japanese sniper spasms and tumbles. Branches snap, leaves flutter down. The body drops almost 90 feet and hits the ground with a dull thud. George works the bolt by feel. The empty casing spins out, glints once in the light, and disappears in the dirt. He chambers a fresh round and stays on the scope. Japanese sniper teams work in pairs, 1 shooter, 1 spotter. If he has just killed the shooter, the spotter has to be close. George scans the neighboring trees, slowly, carefully. At 9:43 a.m., he finds him. Different tree, about 60 yards north of the first, lower in the trunk, maybe 50 feet up, and moving down. Retreating. The man has heard the shot and knows the position is compromised. George tracks the movement, leads slightly, fires. The second sniper pitches backward off the trunk. His rifle rattles through the branches after him. 2 shots, 2 kills. He reloads with a stripper clip, hands steady, breath smooth. For the first time in days, someone is hunting the hunters. By noon, he has killed 3 more snipers. One bullet slams into a sandbag 6 inches from his head at 11:21 a.m., showering him with dirt. He rolls away, counts the seconds, then edges back up to glass the trees. Another sniper, different angle, same problem. He finds him at 11:38 and drops him from a banyan 70+ feet up. 5 snipers dead by midday. Word spreads through the battalion like lightning. Men who called his rifle a toy now whisper a different name, George's gun. They ask if they can come watch him work. George refuses. Spectators draw attention. Attention draws fire. The Japanese adapt. After that 5th kill, the snipers stop moving during daylight. They become very, very still. The trees go quiet in a different way. Not in sound, but in motion. George spends the afternoon scanning branches that never seem to shift. No more shots present themselves. At 1600 hours he returns to Battalion HQ, soaked in sweat and exhaustion. Captain Morris is waiting. Gone is the mockery. The captain wants numbers. George reports, 8 snipers known in the area, 5 confirmed kills today, 12 rounds fired, 7 hits, 5 misses. Morris nods once. Be back in position at dawn. January 23rd opens with tropical rain. Heavy sheets of water slam into the canopy, turning the jungle floor into a stew of mud. Visibility drops to almost nothing beyond 100 yards. George sits in his bunker and waits. The rain hammers the roof like a drum. The humidity crawls into every seam of his uniform. At 8:15 the rain eases. By 8:45 he can see far enough to work. At 9:12 he spots his first target of the day. This sniper has learned at least one lesson. He has chosen a tree almost 290 yards out, pushing the distance beyond yesterday's engagements. That extra space is supposed to make him safe. It doesn't. George adjusts for range, breathes, fires. The man falls. 6 kills. What happens next is something George did not quite expect. At 9:57, Japanese mortars begin to land around his bunker. The first rounds fall short, about 40 yards away. The second salvo lands 20 yards closer. The next will be on target. They have found him, not the snipers, the infantry behind them. They have triangulated his position by sound, by muzzle flash, by luck. George grabs his rifle and runs. He sprints north along the tree line. Roots grab his boots. Branches whip his face. Behind him, the third salvo lands in a storm of smoke and flying earth. The bunker, his shelter for 2 days, disappears in explosions. He dives into a shell crater and lies still until the bombardment ends. The jungle smells like wet dirt, torn leaves and explosives. Ears ringing, heart pounding. He crawls to a new position behind a fallen tree about 120 yards north of the ruined bunker. That afternoon, he kills 2 more snipers. Number 7 falls at 14:23, number 8 at 15:41, killed almost 94 feet up where height turns concealment into silhouette against the late-day sky. By 1700, Captain Morris pulls him back. 9 hours on the scope is enough. 8 confirmed kills in 2 days. The battalion has lost no men to snipers since he started. That night, George lies in his tent and does something simple and brutal. He counts. Intelligence estimates that there are 11 Japanese snipers operating in the Point Cruz groves. He has killed 8. 3 remain. Those 3, he reasons, will be the best, the most experienced, the ones who learned from every mistake that killed a comrade. They now know they are hunted. They know an American with a scoped rifle is out there. And they know exactly what rifle he carries. He loads 5 fresh rounds into the Winchester and tries to sleep. Sleep refuses. At 0300, he gives up. He sits in the dark, the rifle across his lap, listening to the rain hammer the jungle outside. By 5:30 a.m., the rain is coming down hard again. The snipers love this weather. The sound of the storm covers their movement when they climb. George uses the delay to move to a new position. Not the bunker, that's gone. Not the fallen tree. The Japanese already walked their mortar rounds onto that line. He chooses a cluster of large rocks the Marines had used as a machine gun nest in December. Solid cover, slight elevation, overlapping fields of fire into the groves. He settles in and waits for the rain to ease. At 7:43, the downpour tapers to a drizzle. Visibility creeps back. At 8:17, he sees sniper number 9. Unusual one. The man is perched in a palm tree 190 yards away, only about 40 feet up. Most snipers have been climbing much higher for better sightlines. This one has chosen concealment. Thick palm fronds make a natural hide invisible from ground level. But George is not at ground level. From his elevated rock position, he can look down into the fronds. He can see the outline, shoulders, head, the faint glint of metal. He settles the crosshairs, begins to squeeze the trigger. Then he stops. Something feels wrong. This position is too perfect, Too exposed to someone at his height. Too easy. He has been hunting snipers for 3 days now. 8 kills. Every survivor has learned something. The last 3 should not be making elementary mistakes. Unless the mistake is bait. He lowers the rifle and scans the surrounding trees, slowly, carefully. If the man in the palm is a decoy, the real sniper will be somewhere with a clear view of that tree, watching for anyone who takes the shot. George methodically checks every tree out to 300 yards around the palm. At 8:28, he finds the real threat. A banyan tree about 80 yards northwest of the palm, 90+ feet up, deep in the branches, partially wrapped in vines, is another man. Perfect hide, almost invisible. From there he has a clear line of sight to the fallen tree position George used the previous day. He is waiting for George to appear where he used to be, or to fire on the bait. George now has 2 problems. If he shoots the man in the banyan, the sound will announce his actual position on the rocks. That sniper will try to move before George can work the bolt and fire again. If he does nothing, the sniper will eventually realize nobody is at the old position and start searching. So George decides to use the bait against them. He aims at the decoy in the palm, fires. The man jerks and falls, fronds exploding into motion. Immediately George swings the rifle toward the banyan. He does not look for a clean silhouette, he looks for movement. The real sniper has just heard a shot. He knows the bait is dead. He will instinctively turn toward the sound. There, a slight shift among the vines. George snaps the crosshairs onto that darkness and fires before the sniper can complete his turn. The man tumbles out of the branches. His rifle clatters after him. 2 shots, 2 dead, 11 snipers down to 10, then 9. But noise is never free. Japanese machine guns open up on the rocks at 8:34. Bullets smash into stone and send splinters whipping through the air where George had been lying 6 seconds earlier. He is already gone. As soon as he fired the second shot, he grabbed his rifle and slid away along the rocks, dropping into a drainage ditch about 40 yards east. He presses himself into the muddy water, eyes just above the surface, rifle held high to keep water out of the barrel. When the machine gun fire dies, the rocks are chewed up and shredded. He is survived by seconds and instinct. George relocates again, this time to a shell crater partially filled with rainwater, about 100 yards east. The water rises up to his chest as he settles into it. The Winchester rests on the crater rim, muzzle steady. He resumes the hunt. He has killed 10 snipers now. 1 remains. The best, the patient one. At 9:47 he realizes his mistake. He has been searching the trees. The last sniper isn't in a tree at all. Movement flickers at the edge of his vision, low to the ground about 60 yards south, a shape crawling through ferns and vines paralleling the tree line. Methodical, careful. The Japanese sniper is stalking toward the old rock position on his belly, using every scrap of undergrowth for cover. He watched the previous machine gun burst. He saw George run east. He is now working along the logical escape route, hunting the hunter. From the water-filled crater, George has a problem. The rim blocks his angle. To shoot, he will have to rise up and expose himself. So he does the hardest thing in combat. He waits. The sniper reaches a position 40 yards from the rocks and pauses, studying them. His rifle points toward the drainage ditch where George had hidden before. He sees nothing. Minutes pass. Mosquitoes whine in George's ears. His muscles cramp in the cold water. At 10:03, the Japanese sniper moves again. He climbs into the old Marine machine gun nest in the rocks and takes up a position facing east, toward where George should be. The sniper is now only 38 yards from George's real position. Back turned. Center mass shot. Easy. Any recruit could hit it. George does not fire. A man who has survived this long, who has watched 10 comrades die, does not sit in an exposed nest for more than a moment. He keeps his crosshairs on the man in the rocks but widens his awareness. Sure enough, he finds another shape about 70 yards northwest of the rocks, behind a fallen tree. Another Japanese soldier, rifle aimed toward the drainage ditch. 2 men, not 1. They are working as a team, bait and cover. Again, George's bolt-action rifle cannot drop both before they respond. He needs them to move, to expose themselves more. So he sinks deeper into the water, leaving only his eyes and the top of his head visible, the rifle held upright. At 10:13, the man in the rocks stands up. He has seen nothing. He signals to his partner. Both begin moving east in a sweep, intending to flush George out or catch him in motion. They walk past the crater. He rises from the water like something dragged up from the deep. Quiet, slow. He brings the Winchester to his shoulder, water streaming from his sleeves. The first man is 42 yards away. He fires. The soldier drops instantly. He works the bolt and swings to the second man who is turning, bringing his rifle around. George fires again. Another body falls. 2 more dead. The last of the Point Cruz snipers are finished. 11 kills in 4 days. The grove that had terrorized an entire battalion has been silenced by one officer with 1 toy rifle. But the story does not end there. As George climbs out of the crater, collecting his spent casings by habit, new voices drift from the tree line. Japanese, multiple men, moving fast. The snipers were not alone. A patrol or a recovery team is coming to investigate the shots. George drops back into the crater. Only his eyes remain above the water. He holds the Winchester vertically to keep the barrel dry. The voices grow louder. Branches crack. Equipment clinks. They reach the first 2 bodies and start talking. He cannot understand the words, but the tone is urgent, angry, shocked. Then the voices move again. Not back toward the trees, toward him. They have found his tracks in the mud. 6 men at least. He has 5 rounds in the rifle. The rest of his ammunition is in a pack he left near the crater earlier. Poor odds. At 10:31, a Japanese soldier appears at the rim of the crater and looks down. Their eyes meet. George fires point blank from the water. The soldier falls backward. He works the bolt underwater, chambers another round, rises higher. 2 more soldiers appear. He fires twice in rapid succession. Both drop. The remaining men open fire wildly. Bullets tear the ground around the crater. Dirt and water erupt in messy fountains. George crawls out of the crater on the far side, away from the sound, and sprints to a fallen tree 20 yards away. He throws himself behind it and reloads from memory. Rifle fire cracks through the jungle. The Japanese are firing at movement, at noise, not at a clear target. George peers over the log through his scope, spots 2 men advancing near the crater, and drops the lead one at about 50 yards. The second dives for cover. More shouting, more confusion, more voices. Behind him now, the enemy is maneuvering, trying to encircle him. He makes a cold calculation. 2 rounds left. Multiple attackers. Dense jungle. There is nothing heroic about getting killed in a hopeless firefight with a bolt-action rifle, so he breaks contact. He runs north, crashing through undergrowth, lungs burning, heart pounding. Bullets whip past, snapping branches and kicking up spurts of reddish soil. He runs until his legs tremble, then dives into another shell crater, this one mercifully dry. He waits, listens. The Japanese do not follow far. They focus on their dead and the battlefield he just left. At 11:13, George finally reaches the American perimeter. A Marine sentry challenges him, then waves him through when he gives his name and unit. He walks into battalion headquarters, soaked, muddy, exhausted, and very much alive. Captain Morris asks for a debrief. George reports calmly, 11 snipers killed over 4 days, 12 rounds fired at those snipers, 11 hits, then a firefight with infantry, 5 more rounds, 3 more confirmed kills. He is down to 2 cartridges in his pocket and a rifle full of mud and water. Morris listens, then tells him to do the only sensible thing, clean the rifle, sleep. Tomorrow the battalion moves east. The Point Cruz groves are no longer a priority. Japanese forces on Guadalcanal are already preparing for evacuation. Within weeks they will be gone. But George's work, and that oddball Winchester Model 70, has just begun. That afternoon, word arrives from higher up. Division wants to see him. At headquarters, George finds Captain Morris with the regimental commander, Colonel Ferry. The brass has seen the reports. They understand what just happened in those banyan trees. For 2 weeks, an entire battalion could not suppress the snipers at Point Cruz. In 4 days, 1 lieutenant with 1 civilian rifle eliminated the threat. Ferry has a simple question. Can you train other men to do what you did? George thinks about it. Shooting is part talent, part discipline, part training. But the rest, patience, fieldcraft, judgment, can at least be taught. He says yes, it will take time, good rifles with optics, and men who already know how to shoot. Ferry has all 3. The division has recovered 14 Springfield rifles fitted with Unterl scopes, long, heavy, high-magnification optics left behind by the Marines. The regiment has 40 men who qualified as expert marksmen before deployment. George agrees to build a sniper section under one condition: he keeps his Winchester. Ferry approves. The Model 70 stays with its owner. Training begins on January 27, 1943, at a makeshift range about 2 miles east of Henderson Field. 40 men stand in the heat, dust swirling around them. Every one of them has a marksmanship badge that says expert, but none of them has yet killed an enemy from concealment. The Springfield rifles with Unterl scopes weigh about 11 pounds, heavier than a Garand, heavier even than George's Winchester. The glass is powerful but long and delicate. The rifles magnify every mistake, every flinch, every jerk trigger, every sloppy breath. George starts with fundamentals: breathing control, trigger squeeze, natural point of aim, reading the wind from grass, leaves, and mirage. He stresses something modern shooters sometimes forget: the rifle is only as good as the body behind it. Jungle terrain almost never gives you a perfect shooting bench. You use whatever you have: rocks, logs, sandbags, roots to create a stable platform. For 3 days they shoot stationary targets at 100, 200, 300, 400 yards, then moving targets, then targets partially hidden in vegetation. Range days blur together, rifle cracks, shouted corrections, the smell of burnt powder clinging to uniforms. By January 30th, 32 of the 40 men can consistently hit man-sized targets at 300 yards under rough field conditions. George divides them into 16 two-man teams, shooter and spotter. The spotter carries binoculars and a Garand. His job is to find targets, call corrections, and protect the shooter. After each engagement, they can switch roles. That keeps both sharp and prevents over-reliance on one marksman. On February 1st, George takes 4 of these teams into the field. Their mission: clear Japanese stragglers from positions west of the Matnakau River. These are not elite snipers now, just infantry trying to avoid capture during the slow, desperate evacuation from Guadalcanal. George pairs with a spotter named Corporal Hayes. They set up on a ridge overlooking a narrow jungle trail used for resupply. At 7:20 a.m., a Japanese soldier steps into view. Hayes confirms through binoculars. George fires. The man drops. Over the next 6 hours, George's team kills 7 more men on that trail. 7 shots, 6 kills, 1 miss. Thrown off by a quick gust of wind he reads a moment too late. The other 3 teams report similar success. By the end of the day, 23 Japanese soldiers are dead. Not one American has been scratched. In the coming days, George's sniper section becomes a scalpel wherever the regiment needs precise fire. They hit machine gun crews, officers, scouts. They watch over patrols like grim guardian angels. By February 9th, the section has 74 confirmed kills. Again, that number is conservative. They count only the bodies they can see. Through it all, George watches, teaches, and occasionally still picks up his Winchester to show what is possible. On February 7th, near the Tinaru and the Tanambogo Bombo area, George's luck falters. He is watching a sector when a Japanese rifleman spots him first. The bullet slams into his left shoulder, spins him around, and drops him into the mud. Pain is white-hot. Nausea rolls over him. Corporal Hayes drags him to cover and screams for a corpsman. The wound is serious but not catastrophic. The bullet has punched through muscle without shattering bone or severing a major artery. Field surgeons clean it, stitch it, and tell him the usual lie: "You'll be fine, just need rest." He spends 2 weeks at a field hospital near Henderson Field, lying in a cot under canvas while the war grinds on around him. The smell of antiseptic mixes with jungle rot and aviation fuel from the airstrip. While he heals, the Japanese complete their evacuation. On February 9th, American forces reach Cape Esperance on the western tip of Guadalcanal and find it empty. After 6 months of brutal fighting, the Guadalcanal campaign is officially over. George's sniper section has operated in combat for only about 12 days. 74 Japanese soldiers confirmed killed, 0 friendly casualties during sniper operations. That record does not go unnoticed. Colonel Ferry recommends him for the Bronze Star. Headquarters takes note. Somewhere in the paperwork, an asterisk appears next to his name. Knows something about jungle warfare. Knows something about rifles. His war, however, is not finished. While George recovers, orders move across desks thousands of miles away. The Allies are planning deep penetration operations in Burma. They need officers who can lead small units in jungles with almost no support. They need men like John George. In March 1943, he boards a transport bound for India. His Winchester travels with him in a waterproof case, the scope wrapped in oilcloth like a fragile secret. The destination is a new unit with an unofficial nickname, Merrill's Marauders. Officially, it will be the 53007th Composite Unit Provisional. Unofficially, it will be a collection of volunteers asked to do impossible things: march hundreds of miles through jungle and mountains, deep behind Japanese lines, and capture critical objectives with minimal support and no guarantee of escape. The Marauders train in central India. The terrain is hot, humid, and unforgiving. The jungle there is a preview of Burma, thick, steep, leech-ridden. George studies his equipment with a professional eye. Guadalcanal was tough but relatively short range. He had regular resupply. Positions were often semi-fixed. Burma will be different. Patrols will last weeks. Everything will be carried on a man's back or a mule's. Every ounce of weight matters. He modifies his rifle. The Lyman Alaskan scope is rugged but not light. He replaces it with a Weaver 330, still 2.5x magnification, but notably lighter. He swaps the wooden stock for a lighter synthetic pattern, trimming the rifle's weight ounce by ounce. The Winchester drops from about 9 pounds 12 ounces to about 8 pounds 14 ounces. It does not sound like much. Over a 1,000-mile march carrying 60 pounds of gear, it is enormous. In February 1944, Merrill's marauders cross into Burma. Their mission: advance through northern Burma and capture the Mikikina airfield, a strategic prize. That airfield is critical to Allied supply routes into China. The Japanese believe the terrain to be nearly impassable for large forces: mountains, rivers, thick jungle, no real roads, few trails, disease everywhere. Perfect, in other words, for men who specialize in long-range penetration. The march is a nightmare. In the first week they cover more than 80 miles through jungle and hills. Men collapse from exhaustion. Malaria cases soar. Dysentery becomes a constant companion. Pack mules break legs on treacherous descents and have to be shot, each one a painful loss of precious carrying power. Over 3 months, the marauders will march more than 700 miles. They fight 12 documented engagements on the way, ambushes, sudden firefights that flare and vanish in the undergrowth, short, savage clashes at 20, 30, 50 yards. George uses his Winchester only 7 times in that whole campaign. Once at about 412 yards, to kill a Japanese officer directing troops at a river crossing. Once at about 380 yards, to neutralize a machine gun position that has pinned down a company. Once at about 290 yards, to drop a sniper who has halted an entire patrol. Each time he follows the same pattern. The sound of that rifle is distinctive. In a close jungle fight, a second shot from the same position is an engraved invitation for enemy fire. By late May 1944, the marauders capture the Myotokoina airfield. The operation is an outrageous tactical success and a human catastrophe. The unit that entered Burma with around 3,000 effective combat troops emerges with fewer than half fit for duty. Disease has eaten them alive. George survives. His shoulder aches in the damp air. His rifle survives too, scarred by weather but still precise. The interesting irony hits him hard. On Guadalcanal, a private sporting rifle changed the course of a small battle. In Burma, the same rifle has only rare moments to matter. Most of the fighting in this new phase of the war is close, fast, and messy. Garand and carbines, grenades and mortars rule the day. Semi-automatic fire and small unit tactics matter more than the perfect single shot from 400 yards. He sees the future in real time. The Winchester Model 70 is in many ways the peak of a certain kind of craftsmanship. A beautifully made bolt-action hunting rifle. Modern war is marching towards something else: mass production, semi-automatic rifles, standardized training, snipers as formal specialties with dedicated doctrine and equipment, not odd lieutenants with mail-order guns. He understands, but a part of him feels the loss. The unit is disbanded. Survivors, including George, are evacuated out of the disease-soaked jungle. He returns to the United States, promoted eventually to lieutenant colonel. He receives 2 Bronze Stars, a Purple Heart, and the Combat Infantryman Badge. The Army assigns him to Fort Benning, Georgia. His new mission: train infantry officers in marksmanship and small unit tactics. He teaches them what the jungle taught him the hard way: how to move through dense terrain without becoming a target, how to use cover intelligently, how to read signs of enemy presence in trees and shadows, how to shoot well enough that when it matters, 1 bullet is enough. The Winchester Model 70 travels with him again, this time in a footlocker. It sits in his quarters, oiled and quiet. He rarely takes it out. The war burns on without him. Pacific Islands fall, one by one. Europe is liberated, then recoils into peace. By January 1947, John George is discharged from the Army. He steps back into civilian life, carrying things no discharge paper lists, memories of men falling from banyan branches, the smell of wet earth in a water-filled crater, the sound a bullet makes when it hits sandbags 6 inches from your head. He goes back to school. The GI Bill sends him to Princeton University. He studies politics, graduating with highest honors in 1950, then on to Oxford, then to British East Africa, where he spends years studying regional politics and institutions. Eventually, he settles in Washington, D.C., working as the executive director of the Institute of African American Relations, and later as a consultant and lecturer on African affairs for the State Department's Foreign Service Institute. In meeting rooms and classrooms, he speaks of governance, colonial history, African politics. He does not speak of Point Cruz. He does not talk about sniper duels in banyan groves or crawling through Burmese mud. Colleagues know he served in the Pacific, but they have no idea what he did there. One day in 1947, he makes a decision. He will write it down, not to boast, not to sell, but to capture what it felt like, to document weapons and tactics while the details are still fresh and sharp. He spends 6 months at a typewriter. He writes about the Winchester, about the Garand, about Japanese Arasakas, about jungle patrols, ammunition, ballistics, the real distances at which men actually shoot each other when the terrain closes in. He writes with the same clinical precision he used when lining up a shot. No melodrama, no flowery heroics, just honest observation. A friend at the National Rifle Association reads the manuscript, more than 400 pages, and insists it needs to be published. George doubts anyone outside a narrow circle of gun enthusiasts will care. The text is technical, dense, brutally honest. The NRA insists. The book comes out under the title, Shots Fired in Anger. It quietly becomes a classic. Firearms collectors read it. Military historians study it. Serious shooters treat it as a kind of scripture on what rifles actually did and did not do in a real war. George's descriptions of Japanese small arms are still some of the best first-hand accounts ever written. His chapters on jungle fighting and sniping capture nuances that training manuals often miss. Years roll on. He watches from a distance as the United States fights again in Korea, then Vietnam, then later in the Persian Gulf. He watches sniping evolve into a formal military specialty, with schools, doctrine, and purpose-built rifles that would have made his younger self drool. He sees the Garand give way to the M14, then the M16. He sees optics go from rare luxury to standard gear. He sees young men in ghillie suits doing the same deadly mathematics he once did in banyan groves and Burmese ravines. He knows, in a quiet way, that some of what he lived has helped build the foundation they stand on. John George dies on January 3, 2009, 90 years old. Long after he is gone, the Winchester Model 70 that traveled from Illinois to Tennessee to Guadalcanal to India to Burma and back again is donated to the National Firearms Museum in Fairfax, Virginia. Curators place it in a glass case with a small placard describing its history. Visitors stroll past in sneakers and sandals. They read a few words, maybe. Most do not. To them it looks like any other old hunting rifle, but you know better now. That ordinary-looking gun once lay in the ruins of a Japanese bunker, while a young lieutenant watched a banyan tree through a scope no one respected. It killed 11 expert snipers in 4 days when a whole battalion could not. It guarded American soldiers from unseen bullets in the branches. It opened the Army's eyes to the value of trained marksmen with optics. It helped shape the doctrine that would become modern military sniping. Most importantly, it was the instrument through which one man's skill, patience, and stubborn refusal to abandon his toy changed the fate of countless others who never even knew his name. In a world that increasingly measures war in bomb tonnage and missile ranges, the story of John George and his Winchester is a reminder of something more personal. Sometimes history turns on very small things. One trigger pull. One decision to disobey an order and bring the rifle anyway. One pair of patient eyes in a jungle full of shadows. When you think of war, you might picture tanks, planes, massive battles. Somewhere behind those images are quieter stories like this. A single man, a single rifle, and a handful of moments where everything hung on whether he could steady his breathing and trust the glass in front of his eye. The rifle sits in its case now, silent. However, every scratch on its stock, every mark on its metal, is a line in a story that refuses to die as long as someone remembers it, as long as you remember it. Because men like John George, and the forgotten tools they carried, deserve more than silence. They deserve to be seen, to be understood not as legends, but as real human beings who stepped into fear and did their work anyway. That is the true weight behind that simple piece of wood and steel behind the museum glass, not just a hunting rifle, a witness, a partner, a proof that skill and courage, even when mocked, can change the course of lives in the span of a single morning at 9:17 a.m. under a banyan tree at Point Cruz.